Hello.
Hey, David.
Hi. Hey, Nate. All right. I'm going to see if I can get some music going here. All right. So I'm going to try and make my screen. Oh, okay, that's right. I'm screen sharing right now. So welcome, everybody. We'll just let people file in. It seems like some people are still coming in. And then we'll get started. I'm just kind of scrolling through the names here. See who I know. I see a couple people. Yeah, cool. I see some students that I know. You guys might be wondering where I am. I'm in an anechoic chamber, quietest place on earth, but it's actually just a photograph. I shot this image on a job actually for a magazine called Mental Floss a few years back. It looks a lot better than my laundry. So, all right, so I'm going to just start now. You are at the Freelance Hustle discussion. So, what I would love to do today is have this be more of a discussion than just me talking, because I do have a lot to say, but I have a feeling you do as well. And I'd be really interested in hearing your questions, because you can guide this conversation with what you're most interested in. So with that, I'm going to start going through some slides here. 1 second. All right. So this conversation is how to land jobs, negotiate contracts, and get paid. When I was putting this together, I was kind of like, those are sort of, we were talking about putting together a conversation on freelancing because this is a photojournalism conference. And, in the photojournalism world, oftentimes the idea of a job is a staff position. That's sort of the sort of definition of having a job to quite a few people. But I went to school for journalism, but I ended up in the commercial world mostly for earning a living. And in the commercial world, there's no such thing almost as a job. I know there's a few of them out there, but there's not many actual jobs. So, I thought it'd be great to give a conversation, to have a conversation about freelancing at a photojournalism conference, because quite a few people here may want to know more about that, but they it may be the thing they haven't really learned about yet. Plus, of course, there's the state of, the world and the economy right now. So freelancing may become even more relevant in the near future. So I'll give you a little more info about me. So I'm a commercial photographer, which means I do editorial work, corporate work, advertising work. I shoot, just basically whatever somebody will pay me to do. I'm a college instructor, so I teach online to BFA students in California, and I teach in the classroom here in Minneapolis at Minneapolis College. I am an artist. I've been selling prints of my work for a long time. I also am a photojournalist. I shoot for Time Magazine. I shoot for New York Times. I shoot for Wall Street Journal, and that is a different kind of photography than when I'm doing commercial photography, for sure. I'm a writer, which is more of a background thing for me, but it's always been part of what I do. I'm CEO and president of David Bowman Photography, Inc. I don't have any employees except myself, but, I'm an executive, if you want to look at it that way. I've been a freelancer for 30 years, and this is the fourth recession that I've, had to look in the face as an independent photographer. So, some of the things I want to talk about have gotten me this far. So how did I become a commercial photographer, or I should say a freelancer? So when I say freelancer, I'm talking about, you could be a photo assistant, you could be shooting news for a newspaper, you could be shooting commercial photography. That's all freelance photography. It all just depends, who you are and what the work you want to do. That's going to maybe make what you do different from what someone else does, but you're still a freelancer. You're not an employee. So I got my BA in journalism in news writing at Madison. And that was a really big really big program. And I had a really big problem when I graduated because I hadn't done an internship. I wasn't really, I never really was cut out for the mold of being a journalist with a job, I guess. But I didn't know that when I graduated, and I was kind of like, what am I going to do now? So I traveled for a lot of years, for about 4 years after college, just doing my own thing, which is photography and learning. I just got really just totally into photography. So it was almost like an independent interest at that time because my degree wasn't in photography. I didn't have some piece of paper that entitled me to work somewhere in photography. Not that would, but I kind of felt like I was starting over the day I finished college. The savings and loan debacle, if any of you can remember that happened like my senior year of college. And then there was a recession and the Gulf War started. And there really was when I got out of college and it really didn't even seem like a thing, like you would get a job, which I would imagine a lot of students, maybe worried about feeling themselves soon. So I traveled for 4 years and I'm like a born traveler. So I traveled like crazy, and turns out I'm a Sagittarius. Not that I know that much about it, but I can tell you that Sagittarius is probably a freelance sign. So if any of you are Sagittarius, you may be, meant to be a freelancer. And then also my family, the family I come from, my dad ran his own business. He was self-employed. My brother's self-employed. My sister Molly is self-employed. So it kind of runs in my family a little bit. So I ended up in Minneapolis. Minneapolis was like the photo epicenter of what the tri-state area. And so I started doing odd jobs here, but there was public darkrooms I could work in. This was back in the 90s. I was shooting film, started networking, meeting people in darkrooms, meeting people through music. That led me to photo assisting, working for commercial photographers. That's a freelance gig. And then I became a second shooter, which is also a freelance gig, but you're actually taking the pictures under the wing of another photographer. And then from that, I was always doing my own personal work. I started learning how to do marketing, started meeting advertising people, magazine people, and I was in. I was a freelancer. At that point, I was shooting jobs, and I'd been a freelancer as long as I could remember. So that is how I got in there. But I don't really want to talk about me so much here. I want to talk about maybe, some of the things I did, and perhaps some of these could be relevant to what you are dealing with and doing. So what is a freelancer? A freelancer is basically someone who's self-employed. So, if you don't have a W-2 from your employer, you are most likely a freelancer. So it's that simple. How do you freelance? Well, you're doing it the minute they hand you a check and they didn't take any taxes out, and now you got to figure out what to do. You are now a freelancer. Mostly you would get a 1099 at the end of the year when you are a freelancer, and that's basically keeping track of what you owe the government. But beyond that, the business owner is you, even though it's just you, because you are the business. So that is what a freelancer is, in case anybody's kind of unsure of what that even means. Why would you be a freelancer? So, here's the reasons I've come up with why you would be a freelancer. For one thing, the economy. There's just no jobs, right? No jobs doing what you want to do. Or maybe there's one and there's a lot of other people that want that job. Scarcity in a popular profession. So for instance, still photography, it's so rare that there would even be a job. Maybe in journalism, right? Maybe on a newspaper, but beyond that, it's pretty rare. So if you're a freelancer, you can work every day, hopefully. But if you're going to wait until you get a job, you might be a while before you're working. You might never work. Industry standard. Again, in still photography, being a freelancer is the industry standard. It's just the way this business works. There's other industries that use photography that maybe, you know, like I said, in journalism, for newspapers, having a staff position may be more of the standard. There's plenty of freelancers in photojournalism, however. The thing is, though, photojournalism does not pay that great when you're a freelancer. I love working for my newspaper clients, but like if I had to survive on what they paid me, I would not be a photographer anymore. So it's something I do because I enjoy it. It's a challenge. It's hard. It's rewarding, but it's like, as a freelancer, it's not fantastic. Now, if I lived in a war zone or something, maybe it would be my thing, but that's not my kind of photography. So for me, I get calls from newspapers every once in a while, and I welcome the chance to do the work. And it's like I said, it's challenging for sure. But then again, why freelance? Your personality. So if you like all the freedom and if it suits you because you're not a desk job person or a W-2 person or whatever, or maybe you tried that and you were like, I don't even like these pictures I'm taking. I have to do it every day, 40, 60 hours a week. You know, maybe you're an artist and you don't want a job in photography. Maybe you want to just do freelance where every job is different. Okay, so that's just to kind of give you some background. And then I guess I'm going to keep going. I'm going to break for some talking in a little bit, but I'm just going to keep going for now. The pros and cons of freelance, I just want to lay these out as well. So, you know, the pros of freelance, you are the boss. The career is what you make it. So you can do anything. Financial independence. The economy is your frenemy. And technology keeps changing, right? So in a way that can be a pro. But here's the cons. They're the exact same thing. You're the boss. Now what? Career is what you make it. It's up to you. Financial independence. What does that mean when you don't have any work? The economy is your frenemy. Now you know the other side of frenemy. Technology keeps changing. So if I break these down one at a time, you are the boss. So what I mean here is you're the boss. So like, that's fantastic. You don't have a boss, right? You're totally in charge, but what does that mean? What are you going to do with that? Are you going to have employees? Are you going to take care of them? Are you going to be responsible for other people? And what kind of decision, when you make decisions, you can't just if you have employees, you can't just be firing people and changing directions all the time. You've got other people's lives in your hands a little bit. So, hero or zero, it's like, what kind of boss are you going to be? It can be a lot of responsibility. Career is what you make it. All right. So you get out of it what you put in. That you could go really far as a freelancer, or you could not get very far at all, because it's it takes a lot. You don't get to quit after 8 hours a day. It's unfortunately, it's not that easy. But for some people, marketing is super fun and creative because marketing is how you get work. For other people, marketing is maybe hard and expensive, and they feel like it's a barrier to getting work. Will you get out of bed the day you have freedom? Some people, they get out of bed because they know they have to be at work because there's a paycheck waiting for them there. If that's you, freelancing is maybe not, going to work out. You should try it though. I'm not saying you shouldn't try it, but it's a thing for sure. And the competition is fierce in freelancing. There's no protections for a freelancer. So that's the difference between an employee who's you have workforce laws protecting you and your job and protecting you from things. As a freelancer, not so much because you're not anyone's employee. So there's a lot of gray area there. All right, financial independence, how much money are you going to make, right? It's you're independent now. You can make as much as you want. But the thing is that, It can be good or bad. You might not know. You might not know what money you're even going to make. You're independent, but you don't know what you earn until the money's coming in. Tax shelter versus hot mess. So tax shelter is great. You can incorporate. You can do all these great things as a freelancer and write off quite a few things that maybe a person with a W-2 job couldn't write off, because maybe you're buying cameras. You're doing everything you want to do as a photographer. Travel, portfolio, and you can write almost all that off when you're like at least a corporation or something. But if you don't take it up to that level, if you're not paying attention to your finances, it's like you could really be in hot water. So it's a lot of work. Supporting a family, if you're a freelancer, there's no reason you couldn't have a family, but it's tricky, My wife and I were both photo assistants when we met. So we were two freelancers who started a family. And, it's worked for us, but it's also been really interesting. Healthcare, there's no healthcare for freelancers for the most part. I mean, I think Obamacare was probably the closest thing to it. And Minnesota's a great state because there are some safety net features, but in general, healthcare is still an issue for a lot of people. So, it can help if you do have a partner or a spouse, if one of them has healthcare, and then retirement, that's a tough one in any profession, but especially if you're a freelancer, because there's really, it's something you can keep putting off until you retire. And then, obviously it's too late. The economy is your frenemy. Okay. So the American dream is, and I guess I'm using like quotes here, finger quotes. The American dream is to start a business, right? It's capitalism. It's like, it's not that hard to start a business for a lot of people in America. It's not. I mean, there's a lot of support. Money can be really easy to borrow, from credit cards to small business stuff or whatever. There is money out there. And if you hustle, you can get it, but you got to pay it back. And, if you spend that money on building a freelance business and then, the market sort of gets bad and you sort of want to move on to something else, well, you're still going to owe that money. So, I'm sure a lot of you have heard these statistics before. 20% of small businesses fail in the first year. 50% of small businesses fail by the fifth year. So that would apply to freelancers. It doesn't, I think a lot of people aren't necessarily thinking of freelancers, but it depends what you do with your freelance, career. So, right there. But the beauty of being a freelancer, let's say you're just a person with with a camera. If that's your business, you got a laptop, a camera, and you're picking up freelance work, whether as a stringer, photojournalist, or as a photo assistant, you don't have to have that much overhead. So it can be a lot easier to stay in business longer if you can keep your overhead down, because then you're not going to owe anyone money. Maybe you can wait a week or two for your next job if you have to. Then finally, of this list, technology keeps changing. So, it's like when I hear about like social media influencers as like a job, I'm always like, what? I don't think so. They're not teaching that in college yet. You might hear about it. There's always some amazing stories about somebody who does something, but that's not very real. I can tell you that for a fact. Technology does allow for certain people to do really interesting new things though. And I'm not saying it couldn't happen. There's always something new around the corner. So it could be the thing for you, the thing that's going to make you have your career take off and be amazing could be just around the corner. You could be doing it right now. That's one of the benefits of this changing technology. For me, right when I started shooting for my career is right when the internet and digital photography, when I was sort of in my 20s learning how to be a photographer, there was no internet, no digital photography. Then as soon as I started shooting, it was like, boom, have a website, send email promos, print stuff at home. I mean, it was amazing for me. To me, the digital trends changed. The internet made it possible for me to have the career that I've had. Otherwise, before the internet, photographers had to like have a studio and have all this equipment and have employees. And it was like really hard just to take one picture. It's not that hard anymore. It's hard to run a business, but taking pictures is like the funnest, easiest part, I think, of being a photographer. In addition, on this list, I've got still camera, shoot video. Obviously, that's made a big difference for a lot of photographers. That might have really opened up some avenues for a lot of people. But for some other photographers, it might have closed some doors because maybe people are saying to them, hey, can you shoot this in video too? And they're like, no, I don't shoot video. I'm a photographer. And then they're like, well, we're going to hire someone else. My kid could do that. That's like a real thing. My kids are great photographers. They're amazing. So that's a little bit daunting, I think, for the professionals when the art director on the shoot is maybe really good with their iPhone, So my iPhone is better than your DSLR. That's clearly an issue. And the bottom line is nobody cares. Like, nobody cares what camera you shoot a picture with. They care about the picture. So if it's news and you're shooting it, nobody's gonna care about whether it was a DSLR, a mirrorless, or a cell phone. What's gonna matter is how good is it. But then if you're a professional, you're not gonna be shooting with a cell phone. You might pull it out of your pocket in a plane crash that you're in, but beyond that, you're gonna use professional gear because it's gonna get the job done. So with that, I would like to, I've got more to go through here and I'm happy to keep going through it, but I think I'll just stop this screen share for a second and maybe answer some questions and see where we're at. And then after some questions or not, whatever you guys are thinking, I can go back to the presentation. So I've got my grid here on my screen. I can see a lot of names. I don't see a lot of faces, which is fine. But if anybody would like to ask a question, you don't even have to, you don't have to open, and show your image. You could just sort of like, however, Hannah is helping me out with questions here. So I've got my first question here. And it's from Meryl. So I don't mind answering your question now, Meryl, if that's okay. She says, why do you call it freelance instead of owning your own business? I prefer the latter. Well, I think the reason we would call it freelance is because it's sort of the language of the job in photojournalism, right? And in commercial photography. When you're starting out, and this is an academic conference at the University of Minnesota. We're really thinking a lot about students here as well. Really, when you're just starting out, it's like freelance is basically a tax category is what it is. Whereas when you say owning your own business, that kind of implies overhead and infrastructure. Freelance, so basically, let's say there's an assignment, let's say there's a project, and somebody needs a photographer. If they don't have any people on staff, they're either going to have to hire a photographer as a W-2 person or get a freelancer to just do it that day. It's like, yes, go do it. I'll give you $300, $500. That's a freelancer, right? They're doing the same job that a staff photographer might do for that company, but they're as a tax, as a job category and as a tax bracket or whatever the right terminology is, they're basically, doing it as a freelancer. And then at the end of the year, they have to pay their own taxes on that money. But the thing is, if you want to be a freelancer, you can, depending what your field is. You could say, I'm not going to take a staff job. I am just going to do these one-day gigs. Doesn't matter what field you work in. You don't even have to be in photography. It could be in catering. When I was a photo assistant, I was a freelance caterer. Basically, a photographer I knew had a catering business, and he was like, hey, what are you doing tonight? My wife has a catering business. She pays $8 an hour. I mean, this was 25 years ago, and I was like, ooh, $8 an hour. That's pretty good. So I did it. And I got some free food, and actually I catered Kiss at Target Center. I was like backstage with Kiss, and I brought a camera, and I was like taking their pictures without their permission. So it was, just another fun thing to do. But again, that's freelance, right? I didn't work for her. She didn't give me a W-2. The photographer I was working for that day, I didn't work for him. He didn't give me a W-2. I've been all freelance. Every once in a while, I've gotten a W-2 from somebody, but you can even get a W-2 sometimes when you're a freelancer. Just because of the law, it might require them to issue you a W-2, but really you're a freelancer because you're just working for one project. Now, small business, I feel like is, saying owning your own small business, that is what you own when you're a freelancer. But I think a lot of people don't put it into those terms because maybe they're not thinking that far ahead, or, there's a lot of reasons why you might not refer to it as your own small business. I think that freelancer is a term that's put on you by the industry. The industry doesn't put the term small business on you. That's you. You could maybe call yourself small business. Okay. Looks like we've got some other chat stuff on here. So maybe I'll just look through these questions a little bit.
I have one. I'll
sure.
pull one up for you. So I'm seeing Regina, and then I believe one of her students, Audrey, backed her up, is how long it kind of takes to start a freelance business from scratch to get yourself established.
Well, and how do you even get started, right? How do you sort of start finding?
Yeah, well, it depends. It really depends what your audience is or your market, right? You have to research whatever it is you're interested in. So freelancers aren't strangers to the world that they work in. Freelancers are like, you want to start networking with whatever that world is that you want to freelance with. I think freelance sort of implies a certain informality as well. People tend to hire who they know. It tends to be I need someone tomorrow for this thing, they'll get a freelancer for it. New York Times, like a few years ago, they only paid like $200 to a photographer to shoot a job. And that's such low pay that they might not even run the photos. They might be like, we changed the story. It was only $200. And that's how a lot of times people think of freelancers. It's not like they're hiring some company. Because if you run a small business, like a production company of some sort, you'd be like, well, yeah, I'm going to take the pictures, but I also have to do this, and I need to charge you for that. And they build out their business in order to pay for their expenses. And freelancers oftentimes don't have that level of sort of infrastructure a lot of times. So to find, it depends what you want to do. If you want to be a freelancer for newspapers across the world or the country, so that if they need a photographer in Minnesota and they think of you, there is a very specific set of actions you can take in order to make yourself visible to them, because that's what has to happen. They have to see you. They have to think of you. They maybe have to know you. Everyone's going to have different criteria, but it starts with just becoming visible to them. So there's what you would do is you would create a marketing strategy as a freelancer in order to get attention from the people you want to work from. So if you're super local, like if you're like, well, I just want to freelance here in Minneapolis. I want to be a photo assistant. I want to work for these different photographers by the day, and learn about photography in the process. So how would you do that? How would you market to them? Well, first you'd have to research them, find out who they are, find out whose work you like, who you want to learn from, and then, work on your portfolio, because the portfolio for photographers, the portfolio is your number one marketing tool, because no one's going to be that interested until they've seen your portfolio. That gets you in the door. If you didn't have a portfolio, maybe if you knew somebody and the photography wasn't critical, they might hire you without a portfolio. But in general, as a freelancer, you want to have a body of work, and then you want people to see it and know about it. So, there's very specific, and I was going to address some of that in the second half of my PowerPoint. So that's a good question. It's really important question. How do people find you?
Yeah. So similarly, Caitlin asked about how you get in touch with people. Are you using social media? Are you using other avenues?
Well, everything. You have to do everything. So there's not like one tool. There's a whole toolkit, right? And they're all important and they all play a role. I think people overestimate the value of social media, especially younger photographers, because it feels so immediate. You see it. It takes a lot of your time. Your work's there. The people see it, and it feels like that's a really great thing. But the fact is that photo editors in a national magazine are not probably not looking through your Instagram feed, searching for the right photographer. They're addicted to social media just like everyone else. So if you can get in their feed, great. They'll remember you, right? But how do you get in their feed? Lots of times, that's who knows, right? It's like a black art. But I think that it's one tool. So you want to do that. But, you can go straight to the source. Find out who the editors are. Send them a postcard. Send them an email. Try to get an in-person meeting and show your portfolio. Go to a portfolio event where they're present. There's a lot of very specific steps that you can take to market yourself to whoever you want in this world. I mean, that's basic sales, which we don't learn a lot as photographers. But, as a freelancer or, small business person, you have to be actively working towards getting customers and clients. They don't just happen. I mean, sometimes they do. If you have a great website and a blog and you keyword it well, a lot of people might find you that way through Google, just someone Googling Minneapolis photographer. But, a lot of people who are going to find you aren't the people you want to work for. That's the other problem. It's like you could put your phone number in the phone book, right? Who's going to call you? Are the people that you want to work for looking through the phone book for professional photographers? If they are, then put your name there. But, I've never been hired that way. So I've always been marketing myself directly to national and local people who hire the kind of photographer that I want to be.
So I have an interesting question here I'm seeing from David Marks is, do you pay yourself with a W-2 from your business or do you?
Yeah. I mean, I've got my own bizarre ways of doing all that stuff, but yes, basically I do. I pay myself from I'm a corporation. So all the money comes in and it pays all the expenses and what's left over is my profit. And I pay that to myself, and I get a W-2 from my own company. And that's, you don't want to necessarily have to worry about that when you're just starting to freelance. That's like definitely a more sophisticated thing you do later when you have a certain amount of income coming in because it costs more to file your taxes. When you're starting out, oftentimes you're just basically self-employed and you have to pay self-employment tax at the end of the year. But your strategy for sort of what's deductible and all that stuff, you really want to get on that. The day you get your first freelance check, it's like sit down and really, read a book, think about taxes, learn what's expendable and what's not. Get 2 bank accounts. I mean, that's why I teach a business class at Minneapolis College, business of photography. And, that's the first thing I tell people is get 2 bank accounts. Even though you're just one person, you're starting as a freelancer, get 2 bank accounts because one will be your personal account. And that's what you'll spend money on things that a normal person spends money on, food, groceries, things like that. Things that are not deductible ever, or most likely not deductible. And then the other bank account, spend on things like camera gear or whatever. Those are things that you hopefully will be able to write off at the end of the year. Even though you're still just one person, one freelancer, using 2 bank accounts can be a great way to mentally separate those 2 things. I did that. I was advised to do that by my first accountant when I was a photo assistant, and her business card was really great. I remember thinking wow, I really want to get some deductions, because I'm spending all this money on photo stuff. And I met this accountant and her business card said, I work for you, not the IRS. And I was like, yes, that's who I want as my accountant. I want somebody who's going to help me take legitimate deductions so that I'm not, because if you don't save your receipts and you don't take deductions, you have to pay a crazy amount of tax as a self-employed person at the end of the year, more than you would have to pay if you had a job with a W-2. So it's going to be different for everyone. But the first step is going to be to think about this. And there's so many great books that you can read. There's classes you can take. I mean, you can hire somebody, but you still have to be educated even when you hire somebody. You have to, I mean, because in general, you can hire an accountant to do your taxes, but you really have to keep your own books, at least in the beginning. I would recommend it. Like, learn how this works. Learn how to use QuickBooks or something like QuickBooks, because knowing all of that will save you a lot of money over the years. It's, you know, it's a lot of work. That's maybe the first, if you're going to hire an employee someday, that might be the first person you hire. And a lot of this stuff has become more automated lately, you know, with internet stuff and the cloud. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can kind of farm out, especially when you're starting out, and it's not really that much.
So I have a couple of questions here that I want to kind of combine for you.
Sure.
Is moving from photojournalism into the other aspects, sort of how you make that transition, and then when is a good time in your career to start looking for an agency or representation?
Well, good question. So the first part of that question, could you repeat that?
It is moving from photojournalism into other areas of freelance.
Yeah.
Probably, I'm going to make a presumption on this question that it's moving into commercial work.
Right. So when is a good time to move? I mean, honestly, I would say
how to make that.
How to make that move. Well, you know, it's all about your audience, right? So when you create a portfolio or a website, or you have a brand with, you know, your business cards, your whole business face, it's all about who you want to be, but it's also about who they want you to be in order to hire you, right? What can you do to become the photographer that they want to hire? I mean, you got to find your own, you have to find your own comfort level, right? Maybe you have a very distinct style and you don't want to deviate, and that's totally cool. But maybe you're like, you know, I've got a family. I want to own a house, whatever. I want to work more. Maybe you want to work every day. Well, if you want to work every day, you have to figure out how you can be the photographer they want, right? That means research what they need, research what sells, research, you know, what kind of, lots of times people are very literal when they hire a photographer. So they're like, oh, I see you shoot, you know, middle-aged men on lawnmowers. That's exactly what we need for this ad. You know, like, that's it. They're going to see that in your portfolio and you got this big ad campaign because they're like, oh, we know you can do it. And then maybe somebody else is like an amazing photographer and they're like, oh, well, we didn't see anything like that in your portfolio. So, you know, we're going to go with this person. So that actually happens because on the upper level of corporate America, people, you know, there's a lot of safety checks to hire the right photographer. There's a lot of people making decisions about photography that don't know photography, but they do know about buying ads, right? So you got to like leverage yourself when you're trying to break into that world. Like, lots of times they project who they want to be onto who you are, right? So if they've got a corporate identity, they look at you and they're like, oh no, you're not a fit at all. I mean, that can happen, right? That doesn't make sense, right? Because you're just talking about your photos. You're not talking about like the car you drive or the cover of your portfolio or your website logo, right? You're just like, check out my pictures. I can take these pictures. But, you know, lots of times people will project their brand onto you and they want to hire a photographer who sort of fits with what their ideas are. And lots of times they don't put this into words. This is just happening in the back of their heads. So, you know, think about your audience. It's the most important thing you can do about getting work. I mean, I think the biggest mistake people make is they don't think that far ahead. They just think about themselves and the work they're making. I mean, and that's very important. But when you start talking about getting work and getting jobs, it's not really about you anymore. It's about these people who want to pay you to do something for them. They become, you know, like what they say goes. And if you're not okay with that, it's like, you know, maybe you'll turn down certain jobs because you'll be like, yeah, I don't do that. And that's totally respectable. But, you know, if you want to be working and you want to be working often, think about who those people are. Study the photographers who work for them. What do they do? What are their websites like? What kind of pictures do they show in their portfolio? There's so much research you can do. It's amazing. You know, you got to be careful not to lose yourself in the research because maybe you really do want to work for a newspaper. And maybe freelancing for a newspaper should be where you stay, because you're going to build up a body that's more true, a body of work that's more true to what you really want and the reason you became a photographer. And, I would try and stay in touch with that. It all just, people tend to go back and forth. Sometimes you got to do something you didn't want to do in order to find out what you really do want to do. So it's good to try everything. Part 2 is about getting an agent, right? Part 2 of that question. So, getting an agent, I'm not sure where that's at these days, because that changes with the market. When I was a photo assistant, I was like, right away, I was like, oh yeah, I want to have an agent. I definitely want to have an agent, because it sounded to me like a way to get bigger and better jobs, and to sort of just get my book in front of the right people, my portfolio in front of the right people. And I know there's still plenty of agents out there. So I would say, go for it. Try to get an agent, now, if that's what you want. It takes a while. It can really take a while to get an agent. That's like, it's its own process. The thing is, though, it's like, for other people, it's like, why do you need an agent? It depends what kind of work you do and what kind of work you want to do. And it might have to do also with how you want to present yourself. Do you want to come off as somebody who's represented by this? It can be part of your agent's brand becomes your brand, right? So you see these agencies that have these photographers, and they're these amazing places. And you're like, if you're thinking, yeah, that's who I want to be. I want to be represented by them. And we're like, that's my brand too. Then I would aim for that right away. Try to work for photographers that work in that world. But if that's not important to you, I would skip it, because you have to pay them. And, I would recommend you think of your agent as a marketing agent, not just an agent. They are basically going to do your marketing. They're going to tell you what to do, and you're going to do it. So it's not cheap. A good agent is expensive, because they know that marketing works, and the more marketing you do and the better your marketing is, the more work you're going to get. And that means the more they're going to earn, because they get a percentage of what you get. So it's a business relationship. And so an agent that doesn't cost you money, and that isn't expensive, and that is easy to get, may not have that much results. You may do just as well without an agent if that's the case. I mean, you're going to have to investigate it. I think that changes a lot with the economy too,
So I think there was one earlier from Nate Ryan, just wondering how you're spending your days this time, in the office and everything else. With everything that's going on.
Well, I'm just hanging out in the chamber, down in the bunker. I've got I'm really busy teaching. So I shot my last freelance job about 3 weeks ago now. It was right when we were sort of starting to hunker down. I got a job. It was a cover shoot, and it was downtown Minneapolis, and it was a whole weekend of shooting. And I was kind of like, oh, I don't really want to be out shooting right now. But I did it because I didn't have to go inside anywhere. And it was really an interesting job shooting the downtown. It wasn't actually a story about the virus, but it was a story about how downtown Minneapolis has all this, like 50,000 new residents in condos, but like the streets are kind of bare. So it was a story of shooting street scenes, which really kind of fit where we're at with the virus. So that was an interesting job. And then I've been home since, but all my college classes that I teach in the classroom, I had to flip them over onto online, and that's been just a lot of work. Also, I have a family, so I've got 2 teenage daughters in the house now that wouldn't have been otherwise. And then I also teach at a college online, so I'm doing that. And then what I actually can't wait to start doing is working on my archive, because I've only just recently sort of discovered Lightroom. I've always blown off Lightroom because I'm a Capture One user, and Capture One is, if you're a commercial photographer and you want to shoot tethered, Capture One is this amazing software, right? And then you try to use Lightroom, and it's always like, oh, this doesn't make sense. So I was always like, oh, I hate Lightroom. Don't make me look at Lightroom, always. until I started teaching and my students all use it. And I'm like, okay, I got to know how to use this. So I started using it and I'm like, oh my God. So I just created a catalog of everything digital I've ever shot. It's got 700,000 plus images in it. And, you know, it's by default by date, right? So I just can click into all 700,000 and they're in order. It's amazing. But it's, you know, so that's a project to sort of, I don't know, maybe do something besides just scroll through it. And then I've been shooting a black and white project for the past 3 years that I haven't had time to process. So I've got 3 years worth of film. I've got my own darkroom. I'm just waiting for a day off, like maybe when the semester ends, to start developing this film, because it's what I'm most excited about. You know, when you shoot film and you haven't seen the pictures in like over a year and you don't even know what you shot anymore. So I feel like I'm plenty busy. I wish I wasn't so busy, but plenty busy. So it seems like we might be like this for a while. So I'm really happy that the University of Minnesota was able to get this class going, or this conference, keep this conference going and have it online. I noticed a bunch of my students from Minneapolis College are in the grid. So thanks for coming, everybody. It's great to see you.
I second the craziness around the teaching thing, so I'm just thrown in.
Oh yeah, I've been teaching my classes.
That simple is wow.
Well, and mentioning Lightroom, both the advanced and intro to Lightroom classes that we did for breakouts will be available online after this is over.
Yeah. Okay, so do we have like 10 more minutes?
About that, yes.
So I could continue through my presentation for 5 minutes, and then we'll just have 5 minutes for more questions. Does that sound good?
That sounds great to me.
Okay, I'll cruise through this a little bit. So everybody just make a mental note if you see something that interests you. I think we covered a bunch of this stuff already. So, okay, how to freelance. Land a job, negotiate your contract, get paid. Number one, land a job. That's what I was saying about marketing. You got to build a portfolio, research your audience, and then you have to make contact. But you have to do those things.
David, you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks. I'm like looking at the screen, but not sharing it. Okay. 1 second.
Thank you.
Yeah. Boom. Okay. Here we go. Sorry, guys. Let's see. How to freelance. Can you see that? Good. Okay. Land a job, negotiate a contract, get paid. Landing a job, you have to do marketing. Marketing strategy, build your portfolio, research the audience, and make contact. If they don't know who you are, they can't hire you. The goal of marketing is to be seen. How can you stand out amongst the crowd? The goal of branding is to be remembered. So everything you do has to be something that people can remember you for. Who do you want to work for? How hungry are you? If you're hungry enough, you will figure out who those people are, and you will get your work in front of them. Here's some resources. Technical education. I teach a class at Minneapolis College called Photo Assisting Basics. It's a fantastic class for learning how to be a freelancer. There's plenty of other classes out there. Professional organizations. That's like PPA, ASMP. There's a really strong ASMP organization here. That's American Society of Media Photographers. Your network. You know people. Talk to people. Promotions. That's anything you send out into the world to call attention to yourself. There's a lot of promotional things you can do. Postcards, email blasts, portfolio shows, contests. There's a ton of stuff. Cold calling, just picking up the phone or, the email or whatever. Number two, negotiate contracts. Okay, we don't really have time to really dig into usage, but usage is what you are selling when you're a photographer working as a freelancer. You are basically licensing the right to use your work. Usage will determine what you charge, right? So if you're just a photo assistant, you're not going to be really charging usage because you didn't sell any photos. But if you're a magazine photographer, a newspaper photographer, when you sign a contract, you're basically trading the use of your photos for the money that they give you. So usage is everything when it comes to figuring out money. What is your photography service worth? Read the fine print first. Before you do anything, you have to read the contract. And there's always a contract. Nobody's going to hire you to shoot a job and not have a contract. I mean, there's barely anyone. If that does happen, then your invoice becomes the contract. So you have to put contractual language on your invoice. But what I do is when someone hires me for a job, I say, please send me the contract. I need to see the contract. And sometimes people don't. If I know them well, I trust them. If I work for them. But if I don't know them, I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. I'm not sending you a bunch of pictures. You haven't shown me the contract, because it's guaranteed that they are going to hand you a 10 or 20 page contract after you shoot the job. And it's going to basically strip you of your rights that you didn't even know could happen. That's why you do it ahead of time. Like, go into it with your eyes open. How are they going to use your photos? How much do they pay? Will they reimburse your expenses? Are there limits to those reimbursements? Why is this contract 10 pages long? Because there's a lot of legal language in there. More questions you should have. What's going to happen to your copyright? Will you still own it after this job? Model releases. Do you have to get model releases? What if they have you shooting at the Mall of America all day, doing portraits of people in crowds? Does the contract say you're going to get a model release for every single person you photograph? You're going to have to figure that out. You may have to cross that out. Insurance. Do you have to have insurance? Do you have enough insurance? Are you liable for someone getting injured on this photo shoot? Can you make changes to the contract? ASMP is a great place to learn about contracts. I'm a member. If you are a member, you come to this page, and as you scroll down the page, there's this part called Member Resources. Scroll down from there, and there's a whole section called Contracts. And it's full of great info. And this is just one benefit of being an ASMP member. Here's the page you would see if you were a member. I'm not going to click into these because this is just a PowerPoint screen. Plus, you have to be a member. But basically, if you look up at the top here, they have a whole thing called Roadmap for Contracts. If you click those links, you get examples and information on how to create all these different contracts that as a freelancer, you need to know, because people are going to be giving you contracts. You have to give people contracts. And then if you look down lower, they have corporate terms and conditions. If you click on those links, you can read where they've dissected these contracts that as a freelancer, you will be given a contract. And it's like legal mumbo jumbo for sure. And are you going to hire a lawyer to read you a contract? I don't think so. That's going to be really expensive. You need to learn how to read a contract. And an organization like ASMP can help you do that. There's all kinds of resources out there for learning about contract language. Okay, something else I need to mention, negotiate, right? So yeah, they tell you what they're going to pay, right? Well, does the editor really want you to shoot this? So let's say they're not offering you much money, but they love your work and you're going to do it better than anyone. Well, that's time to negotiate. You got to ask for more money because they want you. So you need to learn the signals of like, when is it time to negotiate? Or would anyone with a camera be okay to do this job? If that's the case, they're not going to negotiate with you. They're going to be like, well, we'll just hire your kid, Like we could hire anyone to shoot this. So you need to learn, as a negotiator, you need to learn where does the value of what you bring fall on the scale. The higher on the scale the value is, the more you can negotiate to get paid. The lower on the scale, you might have to take what you can get. That's business, But as a negotiator, the strongest hand that you have is to say no. You can walk away from anything. Somebody could ask you to do the hardest job, the weirdest job, offer you the lowest money, and you have the power of saying no. You can say, hell no, I'm not doing that. And if they want you to do it, they're going to triple your pay. It happens all the time. So you want to learn how to negotiate. You are your own boss. You got to hold on to your copyright. Here's some more resources. I mentioned the ASMP website. There's other professional organizations, APA, PPA. Working photographers are a great resource. So if you ever want to work as a photo assistant, you can learn a ton about how all this works. Business literature, there are so many books out there. And then there's your network. So this was like my first book on negotiating I ever read. It is fantastic. If you've ever read this, you'll know what I mean. This guy was a car dealer, a used car dealer, and he wrote a book about negotiating. It is amazing. So read that. It's short. You could read it in a weekend. ASMP, Professional Business Practices in Photography. This dissects all the paperwork, all the contracts, everything. If you join, I believe you get a copy. You may have to pay for it, but you can even order it from Barnes & Noble or wherever. Advertising Photography by Lou Lesko. This is a great book. He created software called BlinkBid, great software. It's not cheap though, but if you ever feel like making an investment in software in order to create business documents, BlinkBid would be the place to go. But you can read his book. You know, it's a great book on freelance photography. Number 3, I know we're running out of time here, so getting paid. This is the third step in being a freelancer. You know, you have to follow the instructions to get paid. If you shoot a job and you don't deliver, you're not going to get paid, or you may never get hired again. So captions are a big deal. So if you work in commercial photography, you almost never need captions. But the minute you work for a magazine, well, not a magazine so much as a newspaper, captions are like the be-all, end-all. Captions are gold. Captions are almost as important as the photos. So if you're a commercial photographer and you land some freelance newspaper work, you really got to get on top of making captions and using the software to do it. And you know, getting the metadata right. You got to get the work in on time. And then you got to work out the direct deposit most times because companies don't send checks as much anymore. And then figure out if there's bank fees. Whenever I work for newspapers out of the country, you know, I get hit with these like $40 bank fees for them to pay me. And that never really feels right to me. It's like, how come I have to pay to get paid? I feel like they should have to pay that. And so that's something you can negotiate up front and be like, yeah, I'm charging you an extra $50 to shoot this because that's what my bank is going to charge me. Invoice ingredients, your creative fee, your expenses, job description, grant of rights, that's your usage, and then having terms and conditions on the back. Those are the things that go into an invoice for any kind of freelancer, really. If you're a photo assistant, you know, obviously you're not granting rights, but if there's photography involved, you are granting rights to someone. Tax plan, we talked about this already. Have a tax plan, be creative, but follow the law. Register your copyright. You can learn about that on ASMP. That's really important because registering your copyright is like a big stick that if someone does rip you off, then if your copyright is registered, you have a legal basis for, you know, going to court and you will win. And so because of that, people will know not to steal your photography. It's sort of like the big stick thing. But if you don't register your copyright, you're setting yourself up for trouble when something does happen. Rinse and repeat, basically, that's it in a nutshell. That is one freelance job I just went through. So do it again. That's your next job, the next day. So I don't know that we have any more time for questions, but
I'm seeing one question in here.
Sure.
About your website and where you're hosting that.
Sure. Yeah, I host my website at photofolio.com, and that is a great website for commercial photographers, or great website provider. I've never seen a better one. I'm sure there may be, but photofolio.com is fantastic. And it's like when I set up my website, I had to pay a fee up front to get the package, and then I pay a pretty small monthly fee. But it's super customizable. I think it's pretty much the industry standard in commercial photography, that their websites. I'm sure there's some other people out there, but then a step down from there in maybe price would be, there's a bunch, there's plenty of sites out there like, I don't know, Squarespace, Zenfolio. I would put Photo Shelter at number 2. Photo Shelter is fantastic. It's a great organization too, because they have all these guides. So if any of you want to like dig into any of the stuff we talked about here today, go to photoshelter.com and just check out their educational guides. They have PDFs of like everything you can think of for running your own photo business. And then they also, they make websites for photographers. They're basically a template that you put your pictures into. You can change it around. But the greatest thing about Photo Shelter is their back end, because when you have one of their websites, you can create custom galleries for all your clients and deliver through their infrastructure. And that's really valuable when you're shooting jobs, to be able to upload and send pictures to your clients. If you get a website provider that doesn't do that, then you have to pay a third party like Pixie, whatever, and then you have to pay money to send pictures to your clients. It could be a hassle. Photo Shelter is fantastic. So, any other questions, or are we good?
I think we're out of time. So
all right.
we're going to call it good. Thank you so much, David, for your time, for your energy. Regina, do you have?
No, thanks. That was fabulous. Really so much to talk about, but it was a great start anyway.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. I really enjoyed this, and I hope everyone's staying safe and finding plenty to do. It won't be long till we're all out shooting again. So have a good rest of the semester. And
you too. Thanks.
Yep. Talk to you soon.
Hope to see everybody over in Alexandria.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Bye.